Will, you threw the South Carolina Gamecocks. They're going to be playing South Carolina October the 12th, coming off a game against Vanderbilt right before that big matchup, the third Saturday in October against Tennessee. Walk me through why you chose the Gamecocks and how you feel like this one, why? Why did you do this, Will? That's what Alabama fans want to know.
Yeah, so this is going to be my sort of common theme. It's about the team we're talking about, not the team they're playing. So this is more about Alabama than it is South Carolina. I think South Carolina has potentially a couple players in the receiving corps, namely Nick Harbor at wide receiver. I think that dude is primed for a breakout. And, if you look at Alabama's roster, I think their biggest deficiencies are in the secondary. But for Alabama, they'll get through some tests before that. Obviously, they played Georgia in Tuscaloosa 2 weeks before. They'll travel to Madison, Wisconsin, and play the Badgers. They'll host South Florida, who gave them trouble last year down in Tampa. But I think this game, heading into the Tennessee game, everybody remembers what happened the last time Alabama went to Knoxville. Tennessee won on a last-second field goal. This could be a potential trap game because it's a lot of the same players that were at Alabama that lost that game. And, everybody has been used to Alabama just owning Tennessee. So I think maybe the players will have a chip on their shoulder and be looking past South Carolina and looking to Tennessee to that big road game the week after. And it's like most other games that I picked, Alabama should be favored in this game, playing South Carolina at home. South Carolina, their season can go a couple different ways. I think it's kind of boom or bust for them. And you think Alabama has the better roster, so they should be favored. So that's why I call this a trap game. You sandwich it in between Georgia and Tennessee. You do have Vanderbilt and Nashville the week before, but it's Vanderbilt. So sandwich South Carolina between two big games in Georgia and Tennessee. Recipe for a trap.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this too, Will. Like, it's a recipe for a trap. South Carolina for me is going to be a trendy pick throughout this entire show, just in terms of teams having to go play there late in the season. We don't really know what they're going to be, but I do like your pick there. South Carolina, they'll have already played at Wisconsin. They'll have a bye week. Georgia, like you mentioned, at Vandy, which they should handle them. But then this game's officially sandwiched in, like you mentioned, between. I've got the schedule right here. That it's officially sandwiched between. You could say your big non-con game in Wisconsin. No disrespect to South Florida, we like what Golish is doing down there, but Wisconsin, Georgia, and then Tennessee, Missouri, LSU. It feels like that Alabama feels. I'll say this: if they get through the first 4 or 5 games unscathed, do they try to just take a deep breath and say, okay, like let's take a mental break before we kind of get into Tennessee, Missouri, LSU, and the Fighting Mercer Bears? No, I'm just kidding. At Oklahoma and then Auburn. I like it because it's middle of the schedule, and you've played a grueling first half. You could argue, and the back half of the schedule's not really easy either. So South Carolina, I don't know.
Start of the year, no matter what Wisconsin looks like, that's a different road trip that they're not going to be used to, having to go to Madison, Wisconsin, and then Georgia before that. So it's a tough schedule. And like you said, I think if they get, let's just say 4-1 or even 5-0, yeah, do they take a deep breath and think, okay, we got South Carolina at home, we can relax a little bit. And as we know, you can't relax in this conference if you want to win this conference, especially now with no divisions and making the 12-team playoff as an at-large. So you can't take weeks off.
No, you cannot take weeks off. I like your pick, and it was my runner-up to mine. I'll go with mine now. If you want to, I'll let you click on it over there. You get the clicker of banners. I'm going at Oklahoma, and the reason is obviously a lot of people say, "Well, Bryce, it's right before the Iron Bowl. They're going to be looking forward to that game." Here's my thing. I mean, it stays with my theme of I think Oklahoma can be better than that 7.5 win total. Oklahoma is going to be walking into final 2 games. Will. They are going to host Alabama, and they're going to come to Death Valley for the final week of the season. It really feels like those 2 games are going to be must-win games for them to reach the playoff. I think that Alabama could potentially have a playoff spot nearly wrapped up by this juncture of the season. Oklahoma could be playing for their playoff lives. And, going over there, I think this is going to be, we're going to talk about Oklahoma later in the season. They're going to have some big-time games. When Tennessee comes to town, Josh Heupel comes to town in Norman, that's going to be crazy. Here's where I say that this might be the biggest home type of crowd in terms of what could potentially be at stake. You're playing Tennessee earlier in the season if you're Oklahoma, but man, Alabama, going on the road in November to Norman, this has all the makings of a game that you know if you overlook it, if you're looking ahead to the Iron Bowl, maybe Alabama's trying to position themselves, for a bye. You can't afford to really look over an Oklahoma team that could be good. And I'll say this too, and then I'll throw it to you, Will. Your thoughts on this? By this juncture of the season, and this kind of goes to my thought process, we should know who Jackson Arnold is. And if Jackson Arnold is good, then that makes that's why this was a strong candidate for me.
Uh, to that point, that's kind of why I don't see it as a trap. Like, we should know who Jackson Arnold is, unless they're going to make a quarterback change late in the season, which I would think is rare. But for me, I think Oklahoma's going to be too good to call them a quote unquote trap. Even if they are a little bit better, like if they roll into that game, they've got 6 or 7 wins. That's probably below their expectations. It'd be around where Vegas has them, but I think that'd be below their expectations. And you've got the Iron Bowl the week before, so you could think they would overlook them. I think if it was at home in Tuscaloosa, they might overlook them more. But as we've talked many times, I've said on the show, I'm not sold that Auburn is going to be doing a whole lot. And Auburn, by the way, has not gone into Tuscaloosa and won since 2010. So not to say it's a foregone conclusion, but I kind of think those players might think it is. So they'll be more locked in to go to Norman, Oklahoma, which again is a different road trip, being Oklahoma's first year in the SEC. So I think Alabama will have a bit more focus than at that point in the year. And like you said, they could have locked up a playoff spot, but again, I don't know that can be the mentality unless you're number 1 or number 2 in the SEC, and probably number 1, because if you're 2 and you lose, you could drop out of the title game, and then there goes your automatic qualifier, and that could knock you completely out of the playoff.
It could.
We just don't know what it's going to look like. So unless you're undefeated late in November, I don't think you take any weeks off.
Yeah, no, you can't take any weeks off. I think, just for me, obviously Oklahoma, I think is going to be a good football team. I think more of it comes to the location on the schedule. That Iron Bowl game, regardless of what Auburn's going to be, Will, you know as well as I do, even though they get that game in Tuscaloosa, still going to be one that's going to be crazy.
It'll be close for at least 2 quarters.
Hey, don't look. It's only August the 5th, so you know what? Don't get too down yourself.